"Get your hands off my wedding china!" I screamed, but Charles just smirked and waved the movers on. My roses were still damp from this morning's watering, and now they were trampling them, box by box. Furniture James built with his own hands was being packed like junk, and all of it, every single piece, was disappearing into trucks under forged documents my own stepson created. The police called it a civil matter. Then came the realtors. Lockbox, like I was already dead. But Clara had slipped me a note before any of this. "Don't go home, run." She knew. And she also knew where the real will was hidden. I may have looked fragile, but I had 20 years of labeled evidence, a secret file, and one sealed letter no one saw coming. They thought I'd vanish quietly. I didn't. And now? They have no idea what's coming next. My name is Evelyn Mercer, and I'm 75 years old. Each morning, I tend my roses and write letters to my grandchildren in the home my late husband Tom and I built together over 47 years of marriage. My stepson, Charles, and stepdaughter, Lorraine, have been visiting more frequently since Tom passed, but their questions about paperwork feel cold, calculated, nothing like the children I helped raise. My hands may show soil from the garden, but my mind stays sharp as ever, keeping every document, labeled and dated in my study files. Clara, my maid of 20 years, watches them too with knowing eyes as she dusts the shelves. My tea grows cold these days as I sort through Tom's papers, my fingers tracing his familiar signature. But let me start from the beginning. It was just past 6 when Clara caught my elbow in the church parking lot. We'd finished arranging flowers for Sunday service, something I'd done every Thursday for 30 years. But this time, instead of our usual goodbye, she pressed a folded scrap of paper into my palm. Her fingers trembled against mine. "Read it now, Mrs. Mercer," she whispered, her eyes darting to the darkening lot. I smoothed out the note under the amber streetlight. 3 words made my heart stutter. "Don't go home. Run." You know that moment when your world tilts sideways? When every peaceful certainty shatters like dropped china? That was my moment, right there under that buzzing lamp. "Clara, what's happening?" My voice sounded strange, stretched thin. She shook her head, wringing her hands. They were making phone calls in the study when they thought I couldn't hear. Contractors, moving companies, all scheduled for tonight. "Please, Mrs. Mercer, just don't go back there yet." I had an overnight bag in my car trunk, old habits from Tom's hospital stays. Clara squeezed my hand last time before hurrying to her bus stop. I sat in my car, hands clenched on the steering wheel, forcing myself to think clearly. The Paradise Inn off Route 27 had always seemed respectable enough when my sister visited. 20 minutes later, I was checking in, carefully tucking away the receipt. My hands wouldn't stop shaking as I dialed Helen Bishop's number. She'd been my neighbor for 30 years, the kind who waters your plants without being asked. "Evelyn?" she answered on the 3rd ring. "Thank goodness. There are trucks outside your house, big ones, and men in work clothes going in and out." The room tilted. I grabbed the edge of the dresser. "What kind of trucks?" "Moving trucks. Some contractor's van, too. They showed up about an hour ago with papers saying they had ownership documents. Your stepson Charles was here earlier, directing everything. Evelyn, they're loading your furniture." I fumbled for the motel's notepad, documenting everything with shaking hands. Times, truck descriptions, names Helen could remember. The spiral notebook's wire binding dug into my palm as I wrote. "I'm calling the police," I told her, already punching 911 into my cell phone. The dispatcher's voice was professionally detached. "Ma'am, if they have documentation showing ownership transfer, this is a civil matter. You'll need to contact your lawyer." Civil matter. As if my whole life being packed into strange trucks was just some minor disagreement. I saved the call log anyway. Every detail mattered now. Helen called back at 9:45 p.m. I noted the time automatically. "There's more trucks now," she whispered. "And Evelyn?" They've put one of those realtors' lockboxes on your front gate. The old code doesn't work anymore." My fingers went numb around the phone. The roses I'd tended that morning felt like they belonged to another lifetime. I could picture Charles there, watching my treasures being loaded away, wearing that same cold smile he'd had during all those questions about papers and signatures. "Keep watching, Helen," I managed. "Please, and call me if anything else happens." After hanging up, I sat on the stiff motel bed, staring at my hasty notes under the harsh lamplight. The floral bedspread smelled of industrial cleaner, nothing like my lavender sheets at home. Home. Would I ever sleep there again? The wall clock ticked past 10, each sound like a hammer falling. Somewhere across town, strangers were touching my photos, boxing up the china Tom and I had collected piece by piece, dismantling the life we'd built. But I couldn't go back. Not yet. Clara's warning had saved me from walking into their trap, whatever it was. For now, I had to stay put, stay smart, and document everything. I opened my phone and started recording a video, speaking clearly into the camera. It's 10:17 p.m. on Thursday, April 15th. I'm at the Paradise Inn, room 122, because my maid Clara warned me not to return home. My property at 1487 Maple Street is being emptied without my consent. Here's what I know so far. I barely slept that night. By 6 a.m., I was nursing my third cup of bland motel coffee. When Clara texted, "Mason's Diner, 7:30, it was our usual breakfast spot, quiet, with deep booths where conversation stayed private. You ever notice how differently a familiar place feels when your world's falling apart? Mason's hadn't changed its faded curtains in 20 years, but that morning, everything looked sharp-edged and strange. Clara was already in our regular corner booth, hands wrapped around a coffee mug. Her uniform was wrinkled. She hadn't been home either. "Mrs. Mercer," she said, voice low. "I stayed late pretending to dust. The things I heard." "Tell me everything," I said, pulling out my notebook. She leaned forward. Charles had this folder, cream-colored, labeled transfer, in that fancy handwriting of his. Kept showing it to the contractors, pointing at something inside. "And Mrs. Mercer?" Her fingers tightened on the mug. "He was on the phone with someone, talking about how you'd signed everything over last month. But I know you didn't. I've worked for you 12 years. You tell me everything." My stomach churned. No, I certainly didn't sign anything. Then something clicked. "Clara, remember that safety deposit box at First National? The one Tom insisted on?" She nodded. "Where you keep all the important papers. And there's a complete set of records in the home office." I stirred my coffee, thinking. Behind that loose panel in the bookcase, Tom's old hiding spot. But they've changed the locks. Clara's eyes lit up. "The spare key, in that broken planter by the roses?" I could have hugged her. "We need those records. The bank opens at 9. "I'll get the house key during my shift," Clara said. "They won't suspect me. I'm just the maid, right?" Her smile had an edge I'd never seen before. By 10:30, we were settled at a back table in the public library, spreading documents between us. The safety deposit box had yielded bank statements, insurance policies, and Tom's estate binder. Clara had slipped into the house and retrieved the duplicate files, while Charles and Lorraine were meeting their lawyer downtown. "Look at these dates," I murmured, comparing bank statements. Large transfers started right after Tom's funeral, but I never authorized. Then I opened the estate binder. The will looked wrong. You know how old papers get that slight yellow tinge? This one was too white, too crisp. I pulled out my reading glasses and the little magnifying glass I use for crosswords. "Clara, hand me Tom's original signature card from the bank files." She slid it over. I laid them side by side under the magnifying glass. Tom's real signature had always been fluid. He'd spent 40 years signing construction contracts, but this one, the lines wavered, like someone trying too hard to copy. "Take pictures," Clara whispered. Document everything. I used my phone to photograph both signatures, then the witness initials at the bottom. See here? I pointed. The witness was supposed to be Richard Kent, RK. These initials are RH. We logged everything. When we'd retrieved each document, where from, what we'd found. Clara wrote it all in her precise handwriting while I kept examining the will. That's when she gasped. Mrs. Mercer, look at this memo attached to the will. My blood went cold as I read it. The court hearing was already scheduled, exactly 3 weeks from today. They'd planned this all so carefully, counting on me being confused, alone, maybe too grief-stricken to fight back. 3 weeks, I whispered. They're trying to rush this through before anyone catches on. Clara reached across the table and gripped my hand. Then we have 3 weeks to stop them. I stared at the forged will, at Tom's twisted signature. 3 weeks to save everything we'd built together, everything he'd meant to protect. Charles and Lorraine had no idea we'd found their scheme, or that their quiet, garden-loving stepmother was already building a case against them. Back home, well, in my temporary room at the Garden View Inn, I spread everything across the bed and made a list. You know how sometimes the biggest problems get smaller once you write them down? This wasn't one of those times, but at least it gave me a framework. 3 weeks, I muttered, tapping my pen against the notepad. We need proof that'll stand up in court, someone qualified to verify it, and whatever legal paperwork stops them from selling everything out from under me. Clara sat in the room's only armchair, still, in her work uniform. What about Mr. Patterson, the one who used to notarize everything for your husband? Henry? I hadn't thought about him in months. He's retired now, but I felt a spark of hope. Henry Patterson had been Tom's business partner for 30 years before health issues forced him to sell his share. He'd witnessed countless contracts, knew Tom's signature better than anyone except me. I found his number in my old address book, the one I'd grabbed during our quick stop at the house. My hands were steady as I dialed, surprising myself. Evelyn? His voice warmed when he recognized me. It's been too long. Henry, I need your expertise. Today, if possible. I kept my tone light, but he must have heard something underneath. Come over, he said without hesitation. Margaret's at her sister's, but I've got coffee on. Clara insisted on driving me. I'll wait in the car, she said. Keep watch. Sometimes I forgot she'd worked as a night security guard before coming to work for us. Henry's kitchen looked exactly as I remembered. Sunny yellow walls, copper-bottomed pots hanging above the stove, and that old wooden table where we'd all shared so many Sunday dinners. He hugged me carefully, then pulled out a chair. Now then, he said, settling across from me. What's this about? I laid out the documents. The, suspicious will, Tom's original signature cards, even some old partnership papers Clara had found in the home office files. I need to know if this is Tom's real signature. Henry reached into his pocket and pulled out what looked like a thick magnifying glass. Jeweler's loupe, he explained. Better than reading glasses for detail work. Used it all the time for document verification. He bent over the papers, adjusting the loupe with practiced fingers. The kitchen clock ticked steadily as he compared signatures, tracing each one with a gentle fingertip. See here? He pointed to a spot on Tom's authentic signature. Your husband always had this distinctive pressure point where he started his tea, pressed harder, made a tiny pool of ink. And his baseline, the imaginary line the signature follows, it always drifted up slightly at the end. Natural as breathing for him. I leaned closer, following his finger as he moved to the suspicious will. This one? Henry shook his head. No pressure variation. Baselines too perfect, like they used a ruler. And look at the pen lifts, places where they had to stop and start again. Tom could sign his name in one fluid motion. This? He sat back, face grim. This is a forgery. A careful one, but definitely not Tom's hand. Relief made me lightheaded. You'd testify to that? Of course, I'll write up my findings right now, get them notarized at... His phone buzzed, screen lighting up with an unknown number. Henry's hand jerked, coffee cup rattling in its saucer. He hit decline with a thumb that trembled slightly. Everything all right? I asked. Fine, fine. But his voice had lost its certainty. Just telemarketers. The phone buzzed again. Same unknown number. Henry's face went pale as he declined it. I'll, start on that. Analysis. He pulled a legal pad closer. But maybe we should keep my involvement quiet for now. No texts or emails, they can be traced. If you need me, come in person. I watched him begin writing, his normally bold handwriting smaller than usual. The phone buzzed a third time, and this time his hand shook so badly he nearly knocked over his coffee. Clara was right. We'd need to be careful about protecting Henry. But I had what I needed, expert confirmation that the signature was forged. Tomorrow morning I'd see a lawyer, start the official pushback. My stepchildren thought they were dealing with a helpless old woman. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The next morning hit me like a punch to the gut. Henry's message waited on my voicemail, his voice tight and trembling. Evelyn, I can't help after all. Someone dug up old mistakes, things I thought were buried. I'm so sorry. Please don't call back. Don't mention my name to anyone. The message ended with a sharp click. I played it twice more, each time catching new notes of fear beneath his words. You know that hollow feeling when your last safety net disappears? That's what gripped me as I sat on the motel bed, still in my robe, staring at the phone. Clara arrived with coffee and bagels, taking one look at my face before setting everything down. What happened? Henry backed out. Someone got to him. I told her about the message, watching her normally calm features darken. We need a lawyer, she said firmly. Now. She was right. I'd already scheduled an appointment with Patricia Chen, a consumer rights attorney downtown. The sign on her office door listed elder law as a specialty, which gave me hope. Ms. Chen listened carefully as I laid out everything. The forged will, the attempted property seizure, Henry's confirmation, and subsequent withdrawal. Her office smelled of fresh coffee and leather-bound law books, the kind of place that should have made me feel secure. But her expression grew more concerned with each detail. Without an expert witness to verify the forgery, she said, tapping her pen against her legal pad, we're in a difficult position. Courts tend to favor written documents, even questionable ones, over verbal claims. My heart sank. So there's nothing we can do? I didn't say that. She leaned forward. We can file for expedited relief based on the ongoing dispossession attempt. That might buy us time. But we need more than just suspicions about the will. Every scrap of documentation you can find. Bank statements, property records, correspondence. Anything showing your legitimate ownership and their pattern of behavior. And keep a detailed chronology of everything that happens with dates and times. I pulled out my spiral notebook. Already started. She smiled for the first time. Good. That's exactly what we need. Now, tell me more about these contractors they brought in. After the meeting, Clara and I grabbed lunch at a quiet diner. That's when she dropped another bomb. Remember my cousin who works at the courthouse 2 towns over? She stirred her coffee slowly. She says Charles has been meeting with this hotshot lawyer there. Guy's got a reputation for pushing cases through fast, real fast. Sometimes evidence just disappears before it can be filed. My soup went cold as we talked, the picture getting clearer. Charles and Lorraine weren't just trying to steal my home. They were racing to do it before I could stop them. We need proof that doesn't depend on Henry, I said, pushing my bowl aside. Something they can't intimidate away. Clara nodded. Bank records might show if they've been moving money around. And I've seen Charles going through your mail when he visits. Maybe he's been intercepting things? We spent the next hour making lists, thinking like detectives. Every interaction, every helpful offer to handle paperwork, every time they'd insisted on coming inside when I wasn't home, it all looked different now. The sun was setting when I returned to the motel. I just pulled into my usual spot when something caught my eye. A black sedan parked across the street, lights off, engine running. Could have been nothing. People pull over all the time, right? But something about how it sat there, half hidden behind a delivery van, made the hair on my neck stand up. I took my time gathering my purse and papers, using the moment to study the car in my side mirror. Tinted windows, no front plate. The kind of vehicle that wanted to be forgotten. Moving carefully, like I hadn't noticed anything unusual, I climbed out and walked to my room. Only when I was safely inside did I let myself acknowledge what this meant. They were watching me. The game was escalating. You know that moment when reality finally hits and your knees just won't hold you anymore? That's where I found myself, sitting on the edge of that lumpy motel bed, staring at nothing. My roses would wither without their evening water. My husband's reading chair, the one with the worn left armrest where his hand had rested for 30 years, was probably already loaded onto some truck. Would they dump our belongings in storage? Hold an auction? The thought of strangers pawing through our photo albums made me physically ill. A rented room, I whispered to the empty air. That's all that's left. No garden soil under my nails, no familiar creak of the third porch step, no lavender sachets in the linen closet. Just 4 blank walls and someone else's furniture, reeking of whatever air freshener they used to mask the memories of previous tenants. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I hadn't felt this helpless since James's funeral, and at least then I'd had our home to return to, full of his presence. Clara found me like that, still in my day clothes at 9 at night, half conscious of the TV droning weather reports in the background. She took one look and marched straight to the phone. "Yes, I'd like to order delivery," she said firmly. 2 chicken soup specials and," she glanced at me, "make that 2 slices of apple pie." I tried to protest, but she held up her hand. "Mrs. Mercer, we need fuel to fight. Now where's that notebook of yours?" While we waited for the food, Clara pulled out a fresh legal pad. "Let's make a list. Everything we need to prove they've been stealing right under our noses." The familiar act of organizing calmed my racing thoughts. We started with bank records, every authorization, transfer log, and email consent they might have forged. Added contractor invoices, property records, and utility bills showing my consistent payments. Remember when Charles insisted on helping with those online banking forms? Clara's pen scratched steadily. Said it was too complicated for someone your age? I did remember. Had been proud of myself for refusing, actually. He kept trying to get my password, said he needed it to help organize things. The food arrived, and Clara made me eat between phone calls. First to the bank, requesting complete transaction histories and copies of all authorizations. The representative, Sandra, I wrote her name down carefully, gave me a case. Number and promised secure PDFs within 48 hours. "Due to security protocols," she explained. "But we take these requests very seriously, Mrs. Mercer." Ms. Chen called while I was finishing my pie. "I've filed an emergency notice with the court," she said. "Their lawyer will try to get it dismissed, but it buys us time. How are you holding up?" I looked at Clara, steadily working on her list. "I'm not alone." The night grew. Later. Clara reluctantly left for her evening shift, making me promise to call if anything felt wrong. Thunder rolled outside as I tried to sleep, the motel's air conditioner humming an artificial lullaby. "Just one more day," I whispered to myself. "You can last one more day." James would have expected nothing less. He'd faced down bigger bullies in his business days, always with that quiet smile that meant he knew something they didn't. I must have dozed off because the phone's vibration at 2 a.m. nearly sent me through the ceiling. The display showed an unfamiliar number, but the voice was crisp and professional. "Mrs. Mercer? This is Daniel from First National's Fraud Investigation Unit. We need to verify your identity regarding some recently flagged transactions." I barely slept after that 2 a.m. call. By 7, I was already at the bank branch, my hands wrapped around a paper cup of mediocre coffee from the lobby machine. You know that feeling when you're so tired that everything seems slightly unreal? That's where I was, watching the minute hand tick through my identity verification. "And your mother's maiden name?" The bank officer, a young man named Trevor with carefully pressed shirt sleeves, went through his checklist. "Morrison," I replied, fighting to keep my voice steady. "And before you ask, my first pet was a cat, named Mittens." He smiled, just barely. "Thank you, Mrs. Mercer. I'm pulling up the records now." The printer hummed to life behind him. "These are just the past 6 months, but there's quite a pattern here." I spread the pages across his desk, and my heart sank. Row after row of withdrawals, all labeled home care upkeep. 5,000 here, 8,000 there. The amounts made my head spin. Clara met me at the diner across the street, our usual booth in the corner, feeling like the only safe place left. I showed her the logs while she pulled out my personal calendar, the one where I'd recorded every appointment, every maintenance call, every cleaning service for the past decade. "Look at this," she said, jabbing her finger at an entry. "They claimed 8,000 for emergency plumbing repairs on March 15th. But you were hosting your bridge club that day. The house was fine." I remembered that afternoon clearly, the click of teacups, Margaret's lemon squares, the way sunlight streamed through my freshly washed windows. Not a drop of plumbing trouble in sight. We spent the next hour cross-referencing dates. Clara made calls to my regular contractors, who were happy to share their records with me. Mr. Jenkins, my trusted handyman for 15 years, sounded personally offended. "Mrs. Mercer, I haven't done any major work on your property since replacing those gutters last fall. Certainly nothing in the 5-figure range." My hands shook as I created a new spreadsheet, something James had taught me years ago. Column by column, I matched withdrawals to Charles's known visits, to fabricated repairs, to forged authorizations. The pattern was unmistakable. "We need backups," Clara insisted. She disappeared during her lunch break and returned with a handful of USB drives. "My nephew says these are reliable. Let's save everything. Screenshots, scans, all of it." I labeled 3 manila folders with careful precision: will, bank, and contractors. Each document went into plastic sleeves. Each USB drive got a matching label. James would have been proud of my organization. He'd always said good records were better than good luck. "Mrs. Mercer?" Clara's voice had an odd tone. She turned her phone toward me. "You should see this." It was our local newspaper's website. There was Lorraine, front and center in a photo from her charity board meeting. She wore her trademark pearl necklace, my wedding anniversary gift to her father, and that practiced smile that never quite reached her eyes. The comments below the article made my stomach turn. Such a blessing to our community. Lorraine's dedication to others is inspiring. We're lucky to have such a caring leader. My phone buzzed. Ms. Chen, my attorney. "I've seen the article," she said without preamble. "This complicates things. Lorraine's got the town wrapped around her finger with all that charity work. We need to keep our filings strictly factual. No emotional accusations, no public drama. Let the numbers speak for themselves." I agreed, but the unfairness of it all made my teeth clench. Here was my stepdaughter, praised as a pillar of virtue, while systematically stealing my home out from under me. Clara's gasp pulled me from my thoughts. "Mrs. Mercer, look at this signature block." She pointed to a wire transfer authorization from last month. There, in crisp black type below the signature line, was my name. Evelyn Marie Mercer. "But that's not," Clara started. "No," I cut her off, a cold certainty settling in my chest. "My middle name is Marion. It's been Marion For 75 years. They couldn't even get that right when they forged it. The bank's email arrived just after 6. My hands trembled as I clicked through the attachments on Clara's borrowed laptop. Page after page of authorization forms filled the screen, each one a fresh wound to my trust. "Look at these signatures," I said, zooming in. Clara leaned closer, her reading glasses perched on her nose. "See how the M in Mercer has this odd loop? It's the same mistake they made on the will. You know that feeling when puzzle pieces suddenly snap together? That's what happened as we pored over those documents. The forger, and I had a pretty good idea who, had developed habits, pressure points that were too deep, loops that curved wrong, letters that didn't quite connect the way they should. Mrs. Mercer," Clara said, pointing to something at the top of each form. "These online. Authorizations. They all have IP addresses." I must have looked confused because she quickly explained. "It's like a digital fingerprint. My nephew works in IT. He's always talking about these things. Each computer has its own signature." We spent the next hour logging every IP address, and wouldn't you know it? They all matched. Clara made a quick call to her nephew, who did some technical magic I couldn't follow. But his conclusion made my heart race. The computer behind those transfers was registered to Riverside Business Center, Suite 404. "That's Charles's office," I whispered. "The same office where he'd insisted on helping me with paperwork after James passed." I pulled out my day planner, the one James always teased me about keeping in this digital age. "Thank goodness for old habits," I muttered, flipping through the pages. Every visit from Charles was marked in my neat handwriting, complete with times and what he'd claimed he needed to discuss. May 15th. Charles visits to review insurance papers. Transfer of $12,000 same day. June 3rd. Charles brings tax documents. Transfer of $8,500 that evening. June 21st. Charles stops by with investment updates, another $15,000 gone. The pattern was as clear as my rose garden on a summer morning. My hands were steady now as I typed up the timeline, matching visits to, transfers, adding notes about his excuses and what documents he'd claimed to need my input on. Ms. Chen, my attorney, called just as we finished. "I've received the bank records," she said. "This is exactly what we needed. I'm preparing an exhibit list for court, and I'm drafting a motion to compel them to produce the original documents." "The originals?" I asked. "Yes. They'll have to bring every authorization form, every transfer request. We'll get a handwriting expert to examine them properly." I glanced at the motel phone, thinking about Henry. He'd been James's friend for 40 years before this mess. Should I tell him what we'd found? Give him a chance to come forward on his own terms? The phone rang, as if summoned by my thoughts. I let it go to the ancient answering machine, watching the red light blink. A voice crackled through the speaker, unfamiliar but deliberately calm. "Just a reminder that discretion is the better part of valor. Some matters are best left undisturbed." Clara reached over and deleted the message before it finished. "Don't even think about calling Henry," she said firmly. "We need to keep him safe from these people." She was right. I'd seen what pressure had done to him already. The shame in his voice when he'd called to back out. No. Better to protect him. Let the evidence speak for itself. I looked down at my timeline, at the neat rows of dates and dollar amounts that proved my stepson's betrayal. The same hands that had once brought me Mother's Day flowers had been quietly signing away my future, piece by piece. "Send everything to Miss Chen," I told Clara, straightening my cardigan. "Every IP address, every signature comparison, every date match, it's time to let the numbers tell their story." The church parking lot was empty except for Clara's weathered Buick, its headlights off in the growing dusk. I'd always loved this time of day at St. Michael's, the way the stained glass caught the last light, turning the pavement into a kaleidoscope of colors. But tonight, those familiar patterns felt like nature's own countdown clock. "Over here, Mrs. Mercer," Clara called softly from behind the parish hall. She had our makeshift war room set up on a concrete bench, folders spread out, sticky tabs in rainbow colors, and her ancient laptop humming away. "I've been thinking," she said as I settled beside her. "About Henry." My chest tightened. "We can't risk—" "Not directly," she cut in. "But what if we reached out through my nephew? Just to see if there's anything he prepared before they got to him. Something already notarized and official-like?" I remembered Henry's hands trembling over those partnership documents, his jeweler's loop catching the afternoon sun. He'd been so certain about the forgery, so passionate about helping, right until those calls started. "It's worth a try," I conceded. "But we have to be careful. No direct contact." Clara's nephew, bless him, knew how to be discreet. Within an hour, he'd managed to get a message to Henry through channels I didn't quite understand. Something about encrypted apps and virtual numbers. The reply came just as we finished tabbing the last exhibit. My hands shook as Clara read it aloud. "Tell Evelyn to check with the court clerk tomorrow morning. I may not be able to testify, but I did what I could before they reached me." A sealed letter, notarized 3 weeks ago, sent directly to Chambers. "I'm sorry it had to be this way. H." 3 weeks ago? I whispered. "That's right after he first examined the will." Clara was already dialing. "Ms. Chen." The call went to speakerphone, her voice crisp in the evening air. "I'll contact Chambers first thing," she said. "If there's a sealed statement from Henry already in the record, that changes everything. They can't pressure him to withdraw what's already in the judge's hands." I thought of Henry, decades of friendship with James behind him, finding his own quiet way to do right. Sometimes courage looks different than we expect. "Now," Ms. Chen continued, "let's go through your testimony outline one more time. Charles's counsel is notorious for surprise exhibits and hostile cross-examination. We need your narrative tight and clear." We spent the next hour rehearsing. Every bank transfer, every forged signature, every mismatched date, all of it organized in crisp chronological order. Clara helped me tab the critical pages in my reference binder, color-coding them by topic: red for forgeries, blue for unauthorized transfers, yellow for timeline correlations. "Remember," Ms. Chen advised, "when they try to rattle you, just take a breath and refer to your exhibits. Let the evidence speak." The church bells tolled 8 o'clock, 12 hours until the hearing. I gathered our materials while Clara packed up her laptop. In the distance, a siren wailed, probably heading to the hospital across town, but it felt like a warning. All the same. Back at the motel, I placed the last binder on my nightstand. Everything was ready. Exhibits copied, testimony outlined, clothes pressed for mourning. Even my grandmother's locket was laid out, the one with James's picture inside. I'd need his strength tomorrow. Through the thin walls, I could hear more sirens, their cry fading in and out like waves. "Please," I whispered to the darkness, not sure if I was praying to God or James or just the universe itself. "Let tomorrow bring the truth to light." I touched the binder's spine one last time, feeling the tabs beneath my fingers like braille, each one marking a piece of evidence, each one part of the story that would finally be told at 9 a.m. sharp. The courthouse steps were already crowded when Clara dropped me off at 8:30. Security lines snaked through the metal detectors, filled with folks clutching manila folders and looking just as nervous as I felt. My own binders felt heavier with each step. You know that feeling when you're about to face something big and your stomach does somersaults? That was me, watching Charles's attorney swagger through security like he owned the place. Sleek suit, patent leather shoes that probably cost more than my monthly pension, the kind of lawyer who specialized in making truth look complicated. I caught sight of Charles and Lorraine near the elevators, heads bent together in whispered conversation. Neither looked my way. Funny how people who raise you can become strangers so fast. The courtroom gallery was standing room only by 8:55. I recognized faces from church, the garden club, even my old bridge group. Most avoided my eyes, probably unsure which side to favor. Can't blame them. Lorraine had spent years cultivating her image as the town's charitable angel. All Rise! Judge Martinez entered, her black robe rustling as she took her seat. She had the kind of face that gave nothing away, perfect for poker, terrible for anxious grandmothers trying to read the room. Charles's attorney, Mr. Patterson, started his opening with a practiced smile. Your Honor, this is a simple matter of family confusion. Mrs. Mercer, still grieving her loss, has misinterpreted standard estate procedures as something nefarious. My hands clenched under the table. Confusion? They'd tried to empty my house while I was gone. Ms. Chen rose slowly, her voice steady. Your Honor, this is not about confusion. This is about documented forgery and unauthorized property transfer. She gestured to our first exhibit, the will, enlarged to show the signature irregularities. Note the pressure points here and here, the baseline drift, the incorrect witness initials. Patterson jumped. Up. Objection. Chain of custody on these documents is unclear. We have no way to verify. The documents were retrieved from Mrs. Mercer's safety deposit box. Ms. Chen countered. Bank access logs confirm the timeline. Judge Martinez leaned forward. Mrs. Mercer, can you clarify the sequence of events regarding the contractor arrival? My moment. I straightened in my chair, focusing on the facts just like we'd practiced. On April 15th at 6:42 p.m., I received warning that something was wrong at my home. At 7:15, my neighbor Margaret Whitman called to report moving trucks and contractors on the property. At 7:33, I contacted police, who advised it was a civil matter. By 8:20, the security company confirmed my gate code had been changed without authorization. The judge nodded, making notes. Continue. Photos taken that evening show my furniture being loaded onto trucks. Ms. Chen displayed the images on the courtroom screen. A murmur rippled through the gallery. All this occurred without my knowledge or consent, using documents we can prove were forged. Patterson's smile had developed a slight strain. Your Honor, my client, Lorraine Wheeler, has been a pillar of this community for decades. Her only concern has been Mrs. Mercer's welfare. These allegations of forgery are supported by detailed financial records. Ms. Chen interrupted, producing our bank exhibits, showing unauthorized transfers labeled as home care upkeep on dates that contradict Mrs. Mercer's documented schedule. The gallery's whispers grew louder. Judge Martinez tapped her gavel once, silencing the room. Mr. Patterson, she said, her tone notably cooler, these financial discrepancies are concerning. Do you have any explanation for the signature irregularities identified in both the will and these transfer authorizations? Patterson tugged at his collar. Your Honor, Mrs. Wheeler's reputation for charitable work speaks for itself. She's devoted countless hours to community service, raised millions for local causes. That's not what I asked. Judge Martinez's gaze could have chilled wine. I'm particularly interested in these signature analyses. She shuffled through the exhibits, frowning. Tell me, is there any independent corroboration of these irregularities currently under seal with the court? The question hung in the air like summer lightning. I thought of Henry's sealed letter, wondering if the judge had already read it, already knew the answer she was fishing for. Court will recess for 15 minutes, Judge Martinez announced. When we return, I want to examine these financial records in detail. You know that feeling when you're playing cards and you're holding a royal flush. I didn't, until that moment. Clara had squeezed my hand as we filed out, and I caught a glimpse of Charles's face. The confidence was draining from it like water from a cracked basin. When we returned, Ms. Chen approached the bench with our financial binder. Your Honor, these bank records show a pattern of unauthorized access and transfers spanning the last 8 months. She placed the first exhibit on the projector. Note: the authorization form dated March 3rd. Mrs. Mercer's middle name is spelled incorrectly as Anne rather than Anne. I watched Judge Martinez lean forward, adjusting her reading glasses. The gallery had gone quiet enough to hear a pin drop. Furthermore, Ms. Chen continued. "The same signature flaw appears here." She switched exhibits. "And here. The loop in the M shows identical pressure points and distortions to those found in the forged." "Will!" Patterson shot to his feet. "Objection, Your Honor. Foundation. Where did these technical analyses come from? We haven't heard from any qualified expert." "Mrs. Mercer," Judge Martinez cut in, "please explain how you obtained these bank records." I sat straighter, speaking clearly into the microphone. "I contacted First Regional Bank's fraud department on April 17th at 9:15 a.m. My case number was FR 2023-0417-089. The representative, Monica Torres, verified my identity and authorized a complete transaction history with all supporting documents." The judge made a note. "Continue. The bank's IT department provided login histories showing access from an IP address registered to Charles Wheeler's law office on each transfer date." I glanced at Charles, who had suddenly developed an intense interest in his tie. Every unauthorized transfer was labeled home care upkeep, but my calendar shows I was either at church functions or medical appointments during those supposed home visits. A reporter in the third row was typing furiously on his phone. I noticed Lorraine's perfect posture beginning to slip, her manicured fingers drumming against the table. "Your Honor," Ms. Chen said, "the bank's fraud unit has already flagged these transactions for internal review. We've provided their preliminary findings in Exhibit D." Judge Martinez studied the documents, her eyebrows climbing steadily. The loop flaw in the signatures was impossible to miss once you knew what to look for, like spotting a crooked painting that would forever catch your eye. "Mr. Patterson," she said finally, "these signature irregularities appear across multiple documents, all connected to transactions benefiting your clients. Do you have any explanation for this pattern?" Patterson tugged at his collar again. "Your Honor, we maintain these transfers were authorized for legitimate property maintenance. As for the technical data regarding IP addresses, we'd need time to consult our own experts." "The bank's records are quite clear," Judge Martinez interrupted. She turned to her clerk. "Ms. Reynolds, please confirm if we have any sealed submissions relevant to signature authentication in this case." The gallery rustled with whispers. I held my breath, thinking of Henry's letter, wondering if he'd managed to get it through before the threats silenced him. Ms. Reynolds rose and walked toward the judge's chambers. The seconds stretched like taffy as we waited. Through the corner of my eye, I saw Charles lean over to whisper something to Lorraine, whose face had lost its carefully maintained glow. When the clerk returned, she nodded to the judge and handed her a sealed envelope. "The court has received a notarized statement under seal regarding the signature authentications," Judge Martinez announced. "I will review this submission before making my ruling." She adjusted her glasses, looking directly at Charles and Lorraine. "We'll take another brief recess while I examine this document." The recess felt like hours, though my watch showed only 20 minutes. You know that feeling when your whole life hangs by a thread? Every tick of the second hand might as well have been a hammer on my nerves. "All rise!" Judge Martinez returned with the envelope in her hands, taking her seat with deliberate calm. The room crackled with tension as she adjusted her microphone. "I've reviewed the sealed, notarized statement submitted by Henry Davidson, former business partner of the deceased and a licensed notary public for 38 years. She lifted the letter. "Mr. Davidson has provided detailed authentication of James Mercer's signature exemplars from previous legal documents, including partnership agreements and estate planning instruments he personally notarized." My heart practically sang. Henry had come through after all, in his own careful way. "The statement specifically notes," she continued, "that Mr. Mercer maintained strict signing protocols throughout their decades-long association. He used the same pen type, employed consistent pressure, and always signed while seated at his desk, never standing or in haste." Patterson jumped up. "Your Honor, Mr. Davidson's credibility is questionable. He's clearly biased toward Mrs. Mercer and—" "Mr. Patterson," Judge Martinez cut in, her tone sharp as winter wind. The court notes your objection. However, Mr. Davidson's observations are independently corroborated by both the bank's forensic analysis and the documentary evidence before us. The signature variations appear systematic, not random. I watched Charles sink lower in his chair. Funny how a man can shrink when his scheme starts crumbling. Furthermore, the judge continued, this notarized statement details specific baseline discrepancies in the contested will that match anomalies found in the fraudulent bank authorizations. The court finds this evidence, combined with the IP access records, and timeline inconsistencies, both clear and convincing. She lifted her gavel, and I swear the whole room held its breath. The court rules as follows. First, the purported will dated January 15th is hereby declared invalid due to proven forgery. The original estate plan is reinstated effective immediately. The gavel struck once. Second, an injunction shall issue against any further attempts to dispossess Mrs. Mercer of her property. Another. Strike. Third, Charles Wheeler and Lorraine Wheeler are ordered to provide full restitution of all unauthorized transfers with interest within 30 days. The gavel's third strike echoed like thunder. Clara squeezed my hand so hard it almost hurt, but I barely noticed. 23 years of memories, every brick we'd laid together, every rose I'd planted, all of it saved in 3 strikes of a gavel. Bailiffs, Judge Martinez ordered. Please. Distribute copies of this order to any contractors or moving companies still waiting in the hallway. They are to cease all activities immediately. She fixed Charles and Lorraine with a stern look. This court takes a dim view of attempted elder exploitation. The district attorney's office will receive copies of these proceedings. As we stood to leave, camera flashes started popping through the courtroom windows. A cluster of reporters had gathered on the courthouse steps, and through the glass, I could see someone who looked like Lorraine's charity board liaison trying to dodge questions. Mrs. Mercer, Ms. Chen said quietly, we can use the side exit if you'd prefer to avoid the press. But I straightened my cardigan and shook my head. I didn't hide from their lies. I won't hide from the truth. We made our way down the courthouse steps, Clara steady beside me. The reporters surged forward, microphones thrust out like spears. Mrs. Wheeler, someone shouted at Lorraine, does the Riverside Children's Fund have any comment on the fraud allegations against their board chair? Another voice cut through. Breaking news alert, already live. Prominent philanthropist and brother caught in elder fraud scheme. I watched Lorraine's perfect mask finally crack as her charity liaison turned away, phone pressed to ear, clearly wanting nothing more to do with her. All those carefully cultivated connections, that polished public image, dissolved by the truth like morning frost in sunlight. By late afternoon, my living room felt like Grand Central Station. Local news vans lined the street while contractors wrestled my furniture back inside, each piece finding its way home like puzzle parts clicking into place. You know what's strange? Even with all that commotion, all I could think about was making sure they didn't scratch the hardwood floors James and I had installed together back in '82. Clara appeared at my elbow with a steaming cup of tea. The Channel 5 reporter wants to know if you'll give a statement. Let the court records speak for themselves, I said, watching my wingback chair, the one James used to read in every Sunday, being carefully maneuvered through the front door. Though I wouldn't mind seeing what the papers are saying. She handed me her tablet, and there it was, splashed across the Riverside Herald's website. Prominent socialite and brother exposed in elder fraud scheme. Below that, a smaller headline caught my eye. Wheeler siblings ordered to repay substantial, fraudulent transfers. There's more, Clara said, scrolling down. The Children's Fund already issued a statement. I read it aloud, my voice steady despite the satisfaction bubbling up inside. In light of recent court findings, the Riverside Children's Fund announces the immediate resignation of Lorraine Wheeler from our board of directors. Our governance policies require the highest ethical standards. I couldn't help but smile. Looks like they didn't waste any time cutting ties. Charles's law firm, too, Clara added. They've put him on indefinite leave pending an internal investigation. The afternoon sun slanted through my windows, catching dust motes stirred up by all the activity. I remembered how James would tease me about my dusting obsession, saying I was fighting a losing battle against time itself. Now I understood. Some battles are worth fighting, even when the odds seem stacked against you. My phone buzzed with a text from Ms. Chen. Bank freeze on Wheeler assets confirmed. Restitution payment guaranteed. Another piece of justice, wrapped up in legal language. By early evening, the last truck pulled away, leaving my street as quiet as any normal Thursday. The contractors had restored everything. My photos back on the walls, my books lined up just so, even my little ceramic birds arranged on their shelf near the window. One of the younger workers had taken special care with those, treating each one like it was made of gold instead of dime store pottery. That's the last of it, Mrs. Mercer, he'd said. Everything's back where it belongs. Where it belongs. Those words echoed as I stood at my garden gate, watching the sunset paint my roses in shades of amber and gold. The same roses I'd planted the year we moved in, that James had helped me tend until his hands grew too shaky for the thorns. Their sweet perfume mixed with the rich scent of evening soil, replacing the harsh diesel fumes of moving trucks and news vans. From inside, I heard Clara humming as she straightened up the kitchen. Such a simple, peaceful sound after weeks of chaos. A reminder that life could return to normal, maybe even better than normal. Because now I knew something I hadn't before. I was stronger than I'd thought. The evening news would be running stories about Lorraine's fall from grace, about Charles's professional disgrace. Their carefully built facades had crumbled under the weight of their own greed. But here in my garden, with my roses standing faithful guard, none of that seemed to matter anymore. I reached out to touch a perfect bloom, its petals silk soft against my fingertips. All around me, dozens more flowers opened their faces to the fading light, as if they'd been waiting for this moment, this quiet victory of truth over deception, of patience over desperate greed. The roses glowed against twilight. As I whispered, greed always poisons its own well.